when an enraged biker punched an elderly black woman, knocking her unconscious because he believed she shouldn't be in the cafe. He was unaware that her son, an off-duty Navy SEAL, was witnessing the entire scene. The unfolding events, as the SEAL reacted to his mother's plight, were unforeseen by everyone. Before we dive deeper, let us know where you're watching from today, and if you find these narratives compelling, remember to hit that subscribe button. Evelyn Carter, aged 75 and a retired school teacher, had just entered the Beacon Cafe. She was finishing a phone conversation with her son, Caleb, her hand clutching her phone. "Yes, dear, I have just gotten to the cafe," Evelyn spoke, her voice a blend of excitement and apprehension. "I am so eager to see you. It's been too long." "I'm looking forward to it as well, Mom," Caleb's voice crackled through the phone. "I'll be there in about 15 minutes. Are you okay waiting alone?" Evelyn chuckled softly. "Of course, I'm okay. I may be older, but I'm certainly not frail. Just focus on getting here safely." "All right, Mom. See you soon. Love you." "Love you too, dear," Evelyn responded, pressing the red end call button. As she put down her phone, she surveyed the cafe's changed interior. Once a cozy family spot, it was now decked with motorcycle club memorabilia and trophies, a stark transformation that momentarily disoriented her. As Evelyn moved forward, she accidentally bumped into a large man in a leather jacket. "Watch where you're going, Grandma," he sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You lost or something. This isn't your kind of place." Evelyn straightened up, smoothing her cardigan, and looked up to meet his scornful smile. "I'm terribly sorry," she replied, her voice calm yet firm despite the sting of his words. "My vision isn't what it used to be. Please excuse me." The biker muttered under his breath as Evelyn navigated past him, feeling the weight of onlookers' stares. Despite the hostility, she moved with determination, not letting their glares deter her from reaching a booth by the window. Settling in, Evelyn reminisced about the days when this cafe was a place of warmth and laughter shared with her late husband and children. Now, as she sat alone, the atmosphere was noticeably colder, reflecting none of the cafe's past warmth. The click of heels interrupted her thoughts as a waitress approached, her uniform scanty and her demeanor far from welcoming. "Are you lost or something?" the waitress asked condescendingly. "No, dear, I am not lost. I am here to meet my son," Evelyn replied with dignity. "Right. What can I get you while you wait?" "Could I see a menu, please?" The waitress sighed exaggeratedly. "We don't have paper menus anymore. It's all QR codes now, or you can read the board behind the counter." Evelyn frowned. "I'm sorry, but I don't know how to use QR codes, and I can't read that board from here." The waitress's impatience grew. "Look, lady, I don't have time for this. Just go up to the counter if you want to see the menu." Evelyn remained calm despite feeling embarrassed. "I understand you're busy, but even at the counter, I won't be able to read the menu. It's too high up, and my eyesight isn't what it once was." With a sharp sigh, the waitress snatched Evelyn's phone to scan the QR code. After a few rough taps, she handed it back. "There, the menu's on your screen now." Evelyn squinted at her phone, struggling to read the small text. "Do you still have those delicious orange marmalade muffins? They were my husband's favorite." The waitress looked puzzled and irritated. "Lady, we've never had anything like that. You must be mistaken." As Evelyn adjusted to her surroundings, she held on to the hope that Caleb's arrival would bring back a piece of the warmth that the cafe once held for their family. "But they were quite popular years ago," Evelyn insisted gently. "Well, we don't have those anymore," the waitress snapped back, her tone curt. "Our dessert menu is quite limited these days. Bikers here aren't exactly fans of fancy muffins." Evelyn's shoulders dropped a little, another piece of her cherished memories fading away. "I see. Then, I'll just have a simple coffee, please," she requested, trying to maintain her composure. The waitress rolled her eyes dismissively. "Fine. One coffee. Anything else?" Evelyn shook her head, and the waitress turned away, throwing over her shoulder, "Next time, have your eyes checked, Grandma. It might make things easier for everyone." The remark lingered in the air as Evelyn reclined in her booth, feeling the full weight of her 75 years. She mused on how difficult it appeared for the younger generation to display even a modicum of respect towards their elders. The café, once a sanctuary of warmth and familial memories, now felt starkly cold and unwelcoming. Evelyn's hands trembled as she placed her phone back on the table and took a deep breath, reminding herself that her son Caleb would soon be there. The thought of seeing him brought a faint smile to her face. Despite the unpleasantness, she resolved to endure, having faced far worse in her lifetime. Lost in thoughts of happier times spent in this very café, Evelyn remembered the laughter of her children, the warm conversations with fellow teachers, and the gentle teasing from her late husband. These memories, though in stark contrast with her current surroundings, fortified her spirit. Evelyn straightened her back, ready to face whatever else this altered world might throw at her with the same grace and dignity she had always shown. As she drifted between past memories and present realities, the café door creaked open, and a tall, broad-shouldered man in a crisp white navy uniform entered, his presence commanding immediate attention. It was Caleb, her son, his military bearing obvious in his posture and movements. He paused at the entrance, scanning the drastically changed interior, his face showing a flicker of confusion as he tried to reconcile his childhood memories with the current scene. Before Caleb could orient himself fully, he was approached by two large men. Evelyn recognized one as Jake, the biker she had bumped into earlier, and his companion, a burly man with a shaved head named Troy. Jake's voice dripped with mock concern across the café. "Oh, look, Troy, he's as blind as that woman earlier. Must be her son. Are all their kind illiterate? Can't they read the signs that this is a biker's café?" Troy snickered, eyeing Caleb's uniform. "What's with the cosplay, soldier boy? You playing dress-up or something?" Caleb inhaled deeply, his jaw clenching almost imperceptibly. Trained as a respected Navy SEAL, he was accustomed to handling far more threatening situations than this without losing his composure. "Gentlemen," Caleb responded, his voice calm and measured, "I assure you I can read just fine. I'm merely confused because this place has changed significantly since I was last here. Is this still Beacon Café?" Jake's eyes narrowed, clearly irritated by Caleb's composed demeanor. "Yeah, it's Beacon Café, but it ain't for your kind anymore, pretty boy." "I see," Caleb replied neutrally. "Well, as paying customers, I believe my mother and I have as much right to be here as anyone else." Troy stepped closer, his massive frame looming over Caleb. "Yeah, we'll see how much you enjoy this place. We'll make it a stage for you, boy. Free entertainment." As Caleb and Troy locked eyes, Jake leaned in, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "This isn't over, soldier boy. Not by a long shot." The two bikers retreated, but their threat lingered in the air. Caleb remained rooted to the spot, his military training warring with his instincts. He knew he could handle these men if necessary, but he also understood the potential consequences of a physical altercation, especially in uniform. Just as the tension seemed unbearable, a familiar voice pierced through the hostile atmosphere. "Caleb! Caleb!" Evelyn's voice, filled with joy and relief, drew Caleb's attention away from the retreating bikers. He turned to see his mother waving from a booth by the window, her face alight with a warm smile that seemed out of place in the harsh environment of the transformed café. As Caleb made his way to the booth, he felt the weight of other patrons' stares, but it was nothing compared to the warmth flooding his heart at the sight of his mother. It had been 8 long years since they had last seen each other in person, and despite the unwelcome reception, Caleb was determined to make this reunion count. "Mom," he said softly as he reached the booth, leaning down to embrace Evelyn. The familiar scent of her perfume brought back a flood of childhood memories, momentarily dispelling the recent tension. Evelyn held her son tightly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Oh, Caleb, it's so good to see you, my boy." As they separated, Caleb slid into the booth across from his mother, taking in every detail of her face. She looked older, with new lines around her eyes and mouth, but her smile remained as warm as ever, a beacon of love in this unwelcoming place. "But we're here together now. Let's make the best of it," Caleb said as the waitress briskly set their drinks on the table without a word and hurried off. Raising his beer, Caleb toasted to family, his voice filled with warmth, and to memories both old and new. Evelyn, lifting her coffee cup, clinked it gently against Caleb's beer bottle. "To family," she echoed, her smile finally reaching her eyes since entering the cafe. As they sipped their drinks, mother and son slipped into an easy conversation, catching up on the years they had been apart. Despite the cafe's unwelcoming atmosphere, they found solace in each other's company, their bond robust enough to endure the hostility around them. "Mom, I've got some news," Caleb said, straightening in his seat, his expression turning serious. "I've recently been promoted in the Navy. I'm now a lieutenant commander." Evelyn's eyes lit up with pride and excitement. "Oh, Caleb, that's wonderful news," she exclaimed, her joy evident. But as she leaned forward, the cafe's harsh lighting illuminated her eyes in a way that caught Caleb's attention. "Mom," he said, concern coloring his voice, "is that a cataract I'm seeing in your eye?" Evelyn's smile wavered as she blinked and looked away. "Oh, you noticed that, did you?" "Yes, it's been developing in my left eye for a while now," she admitted. Caleb frowned, leaning closer. "Why didn't you tell me? How bad is it?" Evelyn sighed, her hands clasping her coffee cup for comfort. "It's manageable for now, but it's making daily life increasingly difficult. Living alone isn't as easy as it used to be." "Mom," Caleb said firmly, taking her hand, "you don't have to face this alone. I can help cover the medical treatment. We'll get this taken care of." Evelyn squeezed his hand, her eyes reflecting gratitude mixed with hesitation. "That's very kind of you, dear, but it's not just about the money. The doctors aren't sure if surgery is the best option given my age." Caleb's brow furrowed deeper. "What do you mean? Surely there's something they can do." "They can," Evelyn nodded, "but there are risks involved and recovery at my age. It's not as straightforward as it would be for someone younger." A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the background noise of the cafe. Caleb studied his mother's face, noticing new lines of worry that hadn't been apparent in their video calls. "You know," Evelyn said softly, her voice wistful, "I sometimes wish your brothers would take more interest in my care. I understand you have your military duties, Caleb, and it's natural that you live far away, but the others barely call once a year." The pain in Evelyn's voice was unmistakable, and Caleb felt a pang of guilt. He had been so focused on his career that he hadn't fully considered the impact of his and his brother's absence on their mother. "Mom," he declared, his voice filled with determination, "I promise you we're going to figure this out. I'll talk to Mark and David. We'll make sure you're taken care of, whether it's for the cataract or anything else you need." Evelyn smiled at her son, touched by his concern. "You're a good boy, Caleb, just like your father. But don't worry too much about me. I've managed this long, haven't I?" Caleb shook his head, unwilling to accept that his mother should just manage. "You shouldn't have to just manage, Mom. You deserve better than that. We'll make it happen, I promise." As their conversation shifted to more somber topics, A weight settled over their booth, the unspoken dynamics of family and the challenges of aging alone lingering between them. Feeling overwhelmed, Evelyn gently touched Caleb's arm. "Excuse me for a moment, dear," she said softly. "I need to freshen up a bit." Caleb watched with concern as his mother made her way through the crowded cafe to the restroom. Inside, Evelyn leaned against the sink, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The harsh lighting emphasized every line on her face, the reality of aging stark against the backdrop of her full life. As she splashed water on her face, she thought of her children. Caleb was here, but what about Mark and David? Would she see all her sons together again before her sight worsened, or worse? Shaking off morbid thoughts, Evelyn whispered to her reflection, "Come now, Evelyn, no use being melancholy. Enjoy this moment with your son." With a deep breath and a final adjustment of her cardigan, she opened the restroom door, only to find herself blocked by Jake, Troy, and several other bikers. "Well, well," Jake sneered mockingly, "look who we have here. The old lady who thinks she can disrespect us in our own place." Evelyn's heart raced, but she maintained her composure, her years of dealing with unruly students aiding her. "Excuse me, gentlemen, I'd like to return to my son," she stated calmly. Troy stepped forward, towering over her. "Your son? You mean that loser in the costume? What's he trying to prove anyway?" The bikers laughed, their mockery stinging. Evelyn felt a surge of anger. "You should all be ashamed of yourselves," she said, her voice steady and clear. "My son's a better man than you'll ever be. He serves this country while you sit here, bullying old women and feeling important." Her words, dignified yet provocative, ignited their anger. Jake's face contorted with rage as he grabbed her arm tightly. "What did you say, you old hag? How dare your kind disrespect me?" Evelyn, in a moment of defiance and accumulated frustration, slapped him. The sound echoed through the cafe, silencing the laughter. In retaliation, Jake punched her, sending Evelyn crashing to the ground. As she lay dazed and in pain, the biker's laughter resumed, distant and muffled by the ringing in her ears. In that critical moment, as Caleb saw his mother struck down, he acted instinctively. He surged from the booth, his training as a Navy SEAL kicking in, his only thought to protect his mother. As he neared, the bikers turned, surprised by his sudden charge. Caleb tackled Jake and Troy, pinning Jake beneath him, his fist raised. But then, a voice of discipline echoed in his mind, reminding him of the consequences. He paused, his fist hovering, the weight of his uniform and what it represented holding him back. But the entire United States Navy could be implicated. Any violence from my part, no matter how justified it might feel, could have severe repercussions. Caleb's moment of hesitation allowed the other bikers to seize the opportunity. Rough hands grabbed him, pulling him away from Jake and Troy. Surrounded and outnumbered, with angry faces closing in from all sides, one of the bikers snarled close to Caleb's face, "You're dead, pretty boy." Nobody touches our leader and walks away. Standing his ground despite being encircled, Caleb maintained his military composure. "Your leader just assaulted an elderly woman," he responded, his voice low and controlled. "My mother. If anyone should be worried, it's him." Jake, now back on his feet, pushed through his circle of protectors to confront Caleb. "You've got some nerve, boy. Do you even know who we are, what we can do to you and your precious mommy?" Before Caleb could reply, a weak voice cut through the escalating tension. "Caleb, Caleb dear." It was Evelyn. Immediately, Caleb's focus shifted. He shoved past the bikers, ignoring their threats, and knelt beside his mother. Despite the blood and bruising forming on her face, Evelyn maintained her dignity. "I'm okay, son," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Help me up, please. I need to clean myself up." With gentle hands, Caleb helped Evelyn to her feet and guided her back to their booth, his arm protectively around her. "Mom, we need to get you to a hospital," he urged, his voice thick with worry. Evelyn, however, shook her head. No, I'll be fine. Just let me go to the restroom to clean up." As Evelyn headed back to the restroom, Caleb surveyed the scene. He noticed other white customers watching, their expressions a mix of shock and poorly concealed interest. The waitress who had been rude earlier was on the phone, presumably calling the police. Jake and Troy had returned to their seats, but their glares promised that the confrontation was far from over. Before Evelyn could return from the restroom, the cafe door burst open, and 2 police officers rushed in, their hands on their holstered weapons. Caleb felt a momentary relief, hoping for justice, but that relief faded quickly as the bikers exchanged knowing looks. "What's going on here?" one officer demanded, his hand resting on his holster as he eyed Caleb suspiciously. Before Caleb could explain, Jake stepped forward. "Officer, thank God you're here. This drunk, black soldier attacked me and my friend unprovoked. We were just minding our own business when he went crazy." Caleb's protests died on his lips as he saw the officers' expressions harden. They looked at him, taking in his disheveled uniform and the chaotic scene around him, and seemed to come to an immediate conclusion. "Sir, I'm going to need you to put your hands behind your back," one officer said as he approached Caleb with handcuffs. "Wait, no, you don't understand," Caleb tried to explain, but his words were cut off as the officer roughly spun him around and cuffed his wrists. "You have the right to remain silent." The officer began reciting the Miranda rights, but Caleb barely heard the words. His eyes were locked on his mother, who was watching the unfolding scene with horror. "Evelyn!" she cried out, trying to push past the waitress to reach her son. "Officers, please, you're making a mistake. My son didn't do anything wrong." But her pleas fell on deaf ears. The bikers had closed ranks, presenting a united front to the police. The few other patrons in the cafe remained silent, unwilling or afraid to speak up against the dominant biker presence. As Caleb was led towards the exit, he caught a final glimpse of his mother's tear-stained face. The afternoon that was supposed to be a joyful reunion had turned into a nightmare, and Caleb found himself powerless to stop it. Outside, as the officers prepared to place Caleb in the patrol car, the situation seemed hopeless. The false narrative spun by the bikers had taken hold, and Caleb's protests fell on deaf ears. The officers, swayed by the united front presented by Jake, Troy, and their gang, were proceeding with the arrest despite the obvious inconsistencies in the story. One of the officers, a younger man with a stern expression, approached Caleb with a breathalyzer. "Sir, we're going to need you to take a breath test," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Caleb, his wrists still bound behind his back, nodded solemnly. He knew he had only had 1 beer, but even that single drink felt like a damning piece of evidence against him. As he blew into the device, he could see the smug grins on the faces of Jake and Troy, who were watching the proceedings from the cafe entrance. The breathalyzer beeped, and the officer checked the reading. His eyebrows raised slightly, but he said nothing. Instead, he turned to his partner and nodded, a silent confirmation that sealed Caleb's fate. "All right, into the car," the older officer said, placing his hand on Caleb's shoulder to guide him towards the patrol vehicle. Just as Caleb was about to be placed in the back seat, a commotion from the cafe door caught everyone's attention. Evelyn had managed to push past the waitress and was now hurrying towards the scene, her face a mixture of distress and determination. "Please, officers," she called out, her voice trembling but clear. "You're making a terrible mistake. My son is innocent. He was only trying to protect me." The younger officer turned to Evelyn, his expression softening slightly at the sight of the elderly woman's obvious distress. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but we have multiple witnesses stating that your son instigated the altercation." "That's not true," Evelyn protested, her voice rising with frustration. "Those men, they were harassing us. They struck me. Look at my face." The officers exchanged glances, noting the bruising beginning to form around Evelyn's eye and the dried blood beneath her nose. However, before they could respond, Jake's voice cut through the tension. "Officers, the old lady is confused," he said, his tone dripping with false concern. "She had a bit too much to drink and took a tumble in the bathroom. We were trying to help her when her son went berserk." Evelyn's face flushed with anger. "That is a lie." "I haven't had a drop of alcohol," she protested, but her words were cut off by the sudden arrival of another police vehicle. As it pulled up beside the first patrol car, a tall, distinguished-looking officer stepped out. His uniform indicated a higher rank, and there was an air of authority about him that immediately commanded attention. "What's the situation here?" the new arrival asked, his eyes scanning the scene before him. The younger officer began to explain, but his words trailed off as the senior officer's gaze fell on Caleb. Recognition flashed in his eyes, followed quickly by confusion. "Caleb," he said, stepping closer. "Caleb Carter, is that you?" Caleb's head snapped up, his eyes widening as he recognized the man before him. "Senior Officer Barrington, Daniel, is that you?" Daniel Barrington, for it was indeed him, looked between Caleb and the other officers, his brow furrowed in concern. "Can someone explain to me why one of the Navy's most decorated SEALs is in handcuffs?" A hush fell over the scene. The other officers looked at each other uncertainly, while Jake and Troy shifted uncomfortably in the background. Evelyn, sensing a shift in the dynamic, stepped forward. "Officer Barrington, was it?" she said, her voice steadier now. "Please, my son is innocent. These men," she gestured towards the bikers, "they've been harassing us all afternoon. They struck me when I stood up to them, and Caleb was only trying to protect me." Daniel's expression hardened as he took in Evelyn's injuries. He turned to the other officers. "Remove those handcuffs immediately," he ordered. As one of the officers moved to comply, Daniel addressed Caleb directly. "I'm sorry about this, Lieutenant Commander. I assure you, we'll get to the bottom of this." Jake, sensing the situation slipping out of his control, stepped forward. "Now, wait just a minute," he began, but his protest was cut short as the dynamics of authority had shifted irrevocably. Daniel cut him off with a firm look. "Sir, I suggest you step back and remain silent," Daniel commanded, his voice laden with authority. "We're going to sort this out, and I suspect you won't like the outcome." As the handcuffs were removed from Caleb's wrists, the atmosphere palpably shifted. The biker's smug expressions dissolved into uncertainty and apprehension. Evelyn stepped to Caleb's side, her relief visible as she clasped his hand. Daniel then addressed his fellow officers. "Let's take this back inside." He gestured towards the cafe. "I want to hear everyone's story, and I mean everyone. No one leaves until we get to the bottom of this." As they moved back into the Beacon Cafe, Caleb and his mother exchanged a glance, sharing a silent understanding that the tide was turning, and justice might finally be served. Inside, the once raucous laughter and intimidating presence of the biker gang were replaced by a tense silence as Senior Officer Daniel Barrington took command. Daniel's presence filled the room. "All right, everyone, I want to know exactly what happened here, and I want the truth. Who's going to start?" The bikers exchanged nervous looks, and the cafe owner and waitress appeared visibly uncomfortable. Evelyn, still holding Caleb's hand, stepped forward. "I'll start, Officer Barrington," she declared, her voice steady despite her injuries. "My son and I came here for a reunion. We used to visit this cafe years ago, but it's changed a lot. From the moment we arrived, we were met with hostility and disrespect. As Evelyn detailed the events of the afternoon, from the initial encounter to the assault, Daniel listened intently, his expression increasingly serious. When she finished, he turned to Caleb. "Lieutenant Commander, do you have anything to add?" Caleb, standing straight in his military bearing, responded, "Sir, everything my mother said is accurate. I did not initiate any violence. I only reacted to seeing her hurt. I was trying to de-escalate the situation when the police arrived." Daniel then questioned the cafe owner and waitress. "And you two, what did you see?" The owner, a middle-aged man, squirmed. "Look, officer, we don't want any trouble. These bikers are our regulars. We can't afford to lose their business. So, you were willing to overlook an innocent woman being assaulted in your establishment?" Daniel's voice was sharp, making the owner flinch. The waitress, her earlier confidence gone, spoke up hesitantly. "It's true. We saw everything. The bikers harassed them from the moment they walked in. We were too afraid to intervene." A murmur ran through the crowd as Jake, anger flushing his face, stepped forward. "You can't believe them. We're the victims here. That soldier attacked us." Daniel raised his hand, silencing Jake. "I've known Lieutenant Commander Carter for years. We served together on Operation Silent Abyss, a top-secret mission in the Gulf of Aden. We intercepted and neutralized a pirate group hijacking a commercial vessel. Caleb's actions saved many lives. He is one of the most honorable men I know." The weight of Daniel's words hung in the air, causing some bikers to shift uneasily and some patrons to exchange guilty looks. Suddenly, an older man from the back of the cafe stood up. "It's true," he said. "I saw everything. These bikers have been terrorizing this place for months. What they did today isn't right. I should have spoken up sooner." His words seemed to break the dam of silence. Other patrons began to speak up, corroborating Evelyn and Caleb's version of events. Seeing the tide turning, the cafe owner approached Daniel. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice laden with shame. "We should have intervened. We were just too scared. These guys have been running this place like it's their private club. We didn't know how to stop them." Daniel nodded, his expression stern but not unkind. "I understand fear, but it's no excuse for allowing innocent people to be harmed. This ends now." He directed the other officers. "I want statements from everyone here. And you," pointing at Jake and Troy, "you're coming with us. Assault, intimidation, false statements to police. You're facing serious charges." As officers moved to apprehend Jake and Troy, several other bikers attempted to flee. Daniel's voice rang out. "Anyone who leaves now will be considered an accomplice. I suggest you stay and give your statement." The cafe owner approached Caleb and Evelyn, his face remorseful. "I'm so sorry for what happened to you both. Please, let me get you some ice for your face, ma'am. Your meals are on the house, of course." Evelyn nodded gratefully as Caleb kept a protective arm around her. Amidst the chaos of arrests and statements, they found a quiet moment. "Are you okay, Mom?" Caleb asked softly, concern evident as he gently touched the bruising on her face. Evelyn managed a small smile. "I'm all right, dear. It's not the first time I've faced prejudice, though I hope it might be the last. I'm just glad you're safe." As the situation in the cafe settled, Daniel approached them again. "Caleb, Evelyn, I'm truly sorry for what you've been through. These men will face justice. And," he added, looking at Evelyn's injuries, "we'll ensure they cover any medical expenses for your treatment." "Thank you, Officer Barrington," Evelyn said. "You've been a godsend today. Please, call me Daniel," he replied warmly. "Any friend of Caleb's is a friend of mine. Now, why don't you two sit down and relax? I'll make sure you're not disturbed further." As Daniel walked away to continue overseeing the situation, Caleb guided his mother back to their booth. The cafe, once a place of hostility, was transforming. The air of tension was dissipating, replaced by a sense of relief and perhaps the first stirrings of change. "You know, Caleb," Evelyn remarked softly, "I think this place might just become somewhere we can make new memories after all." Caleb squeezed his mother's hand, a mix of emotions crossing his face. The afternoon had been nothing like they planned, but in facing adversity together, their bond had only strengthened. As they sat together, surrounded by the unfolding justice, mother and son found a moment of peace, grateful for each other's presence and the unexpected turn of events that had brought the truth to light.